Hey everybody, welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. And I'm James Quesada.
I'm Bob Wick.
And we're joined by a very special guest, our good friend Dave Powell.
Yeah!
Hey, look at you two! Oh my God, it's almost like we're in the same room in different rooms.
I feel so close to you guys right now.
Oh. Hey.
Dave is another friend of ours based out of the Cincinnati improv community and with OTR Improv. And we're very excited to talk to him. I see that you're wearing your Diff t-shirt underneath, Dave.
I thought I'd show some love to it. Yeah.
And the topic for this conversation is going to be simplicity. And I think specifically it might have been simplicity in offers that Dave suggested. And I think this is a great topic. Simplicity in general is something that is a recurring struggle throughout everybody's improv career, is like how to keep things simple. So I'm excited to crack into it. And Dave, what made you want to talk about this topic?
So for me, I think it's, when you watch shows and you're like, what are they doing? Like, if you're really liking a show, it's what are they doing? And we always remember the end when things probably got really built up and unbelievably funny at really good shows. But then if you notice, it all started from just very simple reactions and moves. And we always forget like that part of it. And even when it gets even more complicated, and I think there's even more levels going on and layers, it still starts off with just very simple reactions, or you notice how little they are doing.
Yeah. If you were to go back and watch a recorded show that you remember getting very complicated, and actually I'll put it in two ways too, because you're kind of talking about a show that ended successfone, Dave, but even a show that went to shit, like that got real complicated, started out real simple. The one that went successful stayed simple and on track longer, and then stacked things as it went. The one that went off the rails just kept getting more and more complicated. But those first moments are like, it's funny the memory of those first moments, how simple they are.
And go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
Thank you. I think it's that common mistake. We like that metaphor we've all heard or used. Bring a brick rather than a cathedral when you're building something together. And I think that's it. Keep it simple. It's yes and, not yes and also. It's just a little bit.
No, exactly. And I'm always amazed by how much people get out of something that's just very deliberate and very direct. I tried to say deliberate and direct at the same time. There is what I noticed.
No.
So direct a bit.
Put it together.
They said very direct a bit, but then what you notice is what they didn't say and how much space they left for someone else to bring their brick to build their part of the cathedral as well. Because we were just talking right before this. I teach an improv class that's a beginner improv class. It's an intro to improv class. It's for non-majors at the university I teach at. And the one thing I always notice is how much they're trying to do and how much they're trying to direct each other. And it's one of those things that you're like, you're all trying far too much. You're all trying too hard. Oh, yeah. And you're barely, it reminds me of like, as a metaphor, like, remember like very young Michael Jordan? He was everywhere on the court. He was running all of the time. He was up and down the court all the time. And as he got older and he got better, he slowed down and he was actually able to control the game more with his skill and also with the help of the refs. But that's a totally different podcast right there. But the idea, like, he did less and got everyone else more involved and actually didn't have to do as much.
Yeah. I think that maybe there's like I think this might be from the Keegan-Michael Key interview with Sam Jones, where he says everyone thinks that improv is about moving fast, thinking fast, right. But it's actually about slowing down and taking things one moment at a time. And that's the way that things build when you do that appears to happen very fast. But like you said, Dave, you can actually stay in control of the building process the more willing you are to slow down. And even that, again, kind of going back to the idea of watching it back, what you think is super. There's so much going on in your head in the beginning moments, but if you can kind of calm that, you're better off. And it might feel like, oh, this is taking a long time, but you go back and it's like, oh shit, that kind of like all fell into place very smoothly. I think, it's not actually slow. It's slow. It's smooth.
Yeah.
We talk so much about listening, and a great improviser listens and listens and listens, but we don't talk about pacing. And, they go hand in hand. You need to have that pace. If our job, to get the big laugh is to build up tension, if you're going at 100 miles per hour, it's hard to keep up. It's hard to build tension. You're not a good storyteller. Storyteller is, it's about the presentation of it. So, use the whole deer, like cut it up, man. Like take your time. Don't rush upon things. And there's also that compound thing people do when they're rushing or doing that heavy-handed like exposition because they have a script in their head that they're not sharing with the rest of us, or they are, but it's one piece at a time. Is they do those compound sentences where the other performer or other character can't react to the first part because they're answering the second part or trying to choose between the two parts, which is more important, You
just got 5 offers in one sentence, and it's how do I react to any of them? And the fact that we all of us kind of mentioned pacing and smoothness, that idea of, I don't want us to watch a show that is 10 minutes of silence or nothing but tension building, but I also don't want to get that ruined by someone coming in with an edit or a tag out or something that adds something that you're like, oh, you missed the most blatantly obvious thing that was going on right now. Right. And I think every once in a while, like that's what I'll do is like, we were talking about shows that when you're watching it and you're seeing when they're struggling. And for me, most of the time, or the most obvious ones I can always think of are the ones I'm like, if they would just react to what the other one just said, if they would literally play the game right in front of them or play to the promise that they've already given themselves, because they're giving themselves gifts all the time. It's just they're giving themselves too many gifts to open up.
Yeah. And also it gives you the opportunity to, when you are listening, to hold on to stuff. Like Middleditch and Schwartz do that all the time. They bring up stuff during the interviews like, oh, I totally forgot that they talked about this is the town full of aliens or been rumored to be full of aliens, and they bring it all the way at the end. If he started off with aliens, then, it would have still been an interesting scene, but like there's that thing like you're bringing back a piece of information we forgot, so it's not a reveal, but it's something interesting. And we forgot about it, and it's kind of like a great artist tool to use that callback in such a way, And if you're going too fast, and here's everything that's interesting at once at the top, you're screwing up your pacing.
You've literally, it's so great that you've brought up Middleditch and Sportz, because I've been using it in my class as well. Because in the time that we find ourselves in, I can't go, hey, go see the show on Friday night, because that's not existing. Whereas like this is kind of like a perfect time for like a long form show that's actually been shot well and translates well for people to watch on a broader level. And with them specifically is, if they used everything in the interview in that first scene, they literally run out of steam in 10 minutes. Whereas they're playing the moments and they just trust each other. They're like, like it's okay if we bring them in or if we don't. But when they do, it's beautiful. And you're like, yes. And as the audience, we saw where it came from as well. It's not like, where did that idea come from? Because we weren't a part of it. I use this metaphor a lot in, I refer to the game as action telephone. I'm not sure what it's called in all the circles, but it's when like you do an action and a sound and the person recreates exactly what you did. They're not heightening. They're not bringing it down. They're just trying to do exactly what you just did. And then the next person does whatever they get past. So it's kind of like, like the game telephone. And it's naturally going to change because people have different bodies and stuff like that. People will notice things will get dropped. But then it becomes really funny in that like deep laughter. 'Cause I've watched this in class happen all the time where someone picked up the way they maybe they chuckled when they did it. Maybe they accidentally turned the wrong way, but the person kept it and they just keep holding on to it. And it becomes funny seeing everyone's interpretation of that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
That's, with simplicity is also the idea that you don't have to force anything to happen. There are things that are going to happen naturally that you're hoping will happen, such as heightening or mistakes that you can make use of. And you don't have to rush to get there. It's not a race to get to those things or to manufacture those things. It's about doing the initial job of just improvising and connecting and being open to noticing the things that happen naturally while you're doing that.
Yeah. I think one of the most dangerous... I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
No, go ahead. I
think one of the most dangerous things is whenever you talk with your group after a show and in the notes or you notice there was something wrong with the scene and someone's saying, well, what I was trying to do. And it's one of those things like I was trying to make this connection from this to that. And they saw it in their head. And I think it goes back to the idea of like them writing the scene. And it's like, I was trying to do this. And if it doesn't succeed because it was like, oh, everyone sees that connection. It was just the scene partner didn't see that connection. Then, maybe it was a listening thing. Or sometimes it then becomes a writing thing of, no, I was obviously trying to bring in something that we all didn't know. We all didn't share within the room. So it wasn't natural for us to for me to interject this thing.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because it's true. And that's something that, especially when you first start or when a troop still forms, or especially in those troops that get formed and everybody's really learning each other, like, oh, I've never met these people. Let's, how are you playing? Some people who are more, I don't want to say dominant, but they kind of, again, they write what they're doing ahead of time. That could be an issue. And that does come up a lot, especially in the beginning.
So what are some things that you say to students that are having that, like, that writer's brain? How do you help them get out of it? Are you telling them? I go back and forth on two approaches to it. Sometimes I'm like, the things that you're thinking are good, but you don't have to use them, like we were talking about. It's like just wait, and stay open to other possibilities and play things as they go. And the other approach is to like just try to focus so intently on your partner and what's going on that you stop thinking entirely about it and you can just react. But so that's kind of how I think about it, or I try to figure out what mental space the person is in, if they need to shake it off, or if they are just trying to use too much too fast, and I'll go from there. But how do you guys help a student that is in that writer's brain?
For me, what I do is I've got a few things. A few of the exercises, and I think one mentality was I remember years ago, Dan Izzo gave us this metaphor. Was if you go to the playground, you don't just swing on the swing once and then go over to the teeter totter and get on that once and go down the slide once. It's like, no, if you get on the swings first, you try to see how long you can stay on that and go as high as possible and jump. And then when you're done with that and tired with it, then you go over the teeter totter. So like the same thing of like, we don't need all of the information at once, but really be involved and passionate about the information you're doing. So that's a mentality thing I give people. I think the exercises where you make them repeat what the other person said to you, and they either have to say "and" or "I know," "you're right," those type of exercises, or when you limit how much they can do. I think an exercise where they can only have 3-word lines or at max 5 words, and if they're struggling with it, then usually what's happening is like, well, you're trying to take it somewhere it doesn't need to go. Just be here with it and let it move at its own pace.
Those are awesome.
Yeah.
For me, I usually, again, you have to figure out why is it something they do? Why is it? For lack of a better term, why is it a bad habit that they participate in? And sometimes it's something as simple as they're taking the writing program and the improv program at the same time, and that's just where their head's at. It's not their personality. It's just like that's where they are as an artist right then. And that can be hard, flipping that switch to that toggle, because they're, when they're doing their homework, they have to think ahead of time. Like, how do I want to finish the sketch? How do I want to finish the sketch? They get on stage. How do I want to finish the scene? How do I want to finish the scene?
Yeah.
And they can't really differentiate. Sometimes it's just like, a personality trait. They feel more comfortable in control. So like stuff that can break them of that habit or make them more comfortable. Something as easy as playing new choice is fun, and showing them like
throw yourselves curveballs. Yeah.
yeah. With the theory of, your first choice might be the most obvious choice, and we're not supposed to be obvious storytellers. We're not supposed to be obvious people. We're trying to show them a slice of life that no one's ever seen or that's more interesting. So wait for your third choice. And make sure that your third choice is a direct reaction to all the information that's been given to you and what's been created, and that it's adjacent to the scene itself. So it kind of forces them to listen, or just something as simple as making them do that exercise where you have to repeat the last line the other character has said before you say your own, and do it out loud, so they get used to that. Like it's almost it's an exercise, so it's training. You're training your brain to take everything in, dissect it, see if there's any subtext, and reply to the subtext rather than the actual words. Because I think that's another habit people get into.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing that has become a recurring point of interest for me over the course of these conversations, which is ways to productively be in your head, especially while training and exercising, because what you're talking about, Bob, is taking time to do some analysis. It's basically like doing script analysis for acting with a script, but you're doing it in real time, and you're like, I heard what this says, let me repeat it, let me see what it's about, what's behind it, and what the literal text is saying, and then you make a more informed, useful choice after that, having taken your time before you rush to respond. And what that becomes once you exercise that way, down the road, what that becomes is these collapsible moments where it's happening on its own because you're kind of like training your mind to think that way. But if you like zoomed in on it and looked at all the things that happened as you're hearing line by line, there's all these little micro connections that are being made, and you're training your brain to do that without having to be so active about it when you're actually on stage.
I mean, we're as humans, we kind of live in that world as it is. I mean, you walk into your house and you know how your girlfriend feels about you that day by the way she says hello. We all been there, on the good days and the bad. We know. And so, I mean, why should your characters in your scene be any different? It's natural.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of work to become that natural. It's how they talk about in sports, like the deep pass in football, or watching Free Solo when he climbs El Capitan, like how like the day he does it, it looks like, of course, it was supposed to happen, and it looked obvious because he was so dialed in. It took 9 years of work to get that dialed in, and a bunch of failures. And that idea of, everyone knows about the 10,000 hours with Outliers, but that idea of like, you have to practice this a lot, and probably doing it only 3 hours a week isn't going to get you there. It's going to just take a lot longer to get you there. But if you put in like an hour a day, you at least get 7 more hours. That's 4 more than you had beforehand. And right. It'll make you more natural. Because, I do remember Sean Hanlon calling me out on that when I was like going through SC and I was taking the writing class at the same time. And just being like, I see you going through like your Rolodex of like you're trying to hit a home run on every single line. Take your single, take your double, and just go with the simple thing right there. And when you get the big fat pitch, you'll hit the home run, but you don't have to hit it doesn't have to be the funniest line. every single time.
So let me ask you guys this. What did that click for you? Is it something you guys did naturally, or is it something like, oh, well, I mean, you mentioned that Sean kind of pointed out. Was that the moment, or did it take some work, or is there a scene or a set that was like, oh man, I really need to slow down a bit?
I think the way that it clicked most permanently for me was reading the TJ and Dave book, Improvisation at the Speed of Life. I want to say this is from there. I'm probably miscrediting Keegan and TJ and Dave with all sorts of things, but like I think it's from that book, and they talk about the more you say, the less it means, and so to just be to make more out of less, and I've heard that plenty. That less is more. It's not what you say; it's how you use it. Like those sort of things, but saying it with that phrasing of the more you say, the less it means, really drove home for me what simplicity is about. Is about making more meaning out of less things.
Oh my God, James! I can't tell you how many times I just tell my students, like, they just said, like, your husband just said they don't want to be with you anymore. Like, react to that. Your kids are screaming, and like, don't be the cliches, Dad. Like, react to that. Just the idea of make it meaningful, make it like, be vulnerable, let it cut you, let it affect you. Like, it blows my mind how like they're just cool with everything. Then it's like, well, then you're not going to get anything out of any of that because none of this means anything to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Bob? Did you have a particular? Sorry, Dave. Did you have more?
No. I'm still thinking about my moment exactly.
Gotcha.
If I have it,
I got one. I'll cover you. Take your time. You know what? Pace yourself.
God, this
Pace
closet,
yourself.
this
And when you're
closet
ready,
light is hot.
So it was almost a compound thing. When I was at Second City, Quentin Hicks taught a workshop, and it was incredible. I learned a lot during that workshop. That guy just about professionalism, not just being on stage, but learning like the strong spots of your stage to in itself. Like, for example, at Second City, there was microphones, stage mics, and he's like, well, I know this one's the best for singing. I know this one's the best for monologues. When I'm doing a monologue, I'll move over here with my character so the sound's better. Like, all these really cool techniques. And then he had us go up individually, and he was giving notes, and he kind of gave me notes within the scene, and I don't remember what they were specifically, but after the class, he kind of gave notes in an email, and I still have it because it's just like, oh my God, just incredible. But he specifically told me to watch background actors because they do so much with their face and so much, and like, you can tell by the reaction, and some people, some background actors, like in a restaurant, are just supposed to be eating and not paying attention, but like the good ones kind of do these slight movements and all the stuff. And he gave me a couple scenes to watch, and like specifically one from Seven that, like, look at this exchange, how they're saying all this stuff and not actually saying any dialogue. So it's something to pace yourself with. And it stuck with me, but I didn't really know how to approach it or how to like utilize it for my own style. And then when we got to go and I got to do Laughter House 5, when it was like the first time I actually did something that was like a long, not mono, but it's like almost a one act, improvised one act.
It's like an hour long show.
Yeah. And we all took turns being the lead. I really got to use that, and it really started like it just something about that show and the rehearsal process really made it like click. And I watched some of the stuff I did before that and after, and my style just changed. Like, even when I do showdowns, which is all short form, I feel good about taking my time and letting the scene breathe, and really heightening moment to moment rather than thinking I need to get funny per minute, which I think it was my old style. Like, get in their face, like, oh my God, if I'm not doing something, I'm not doing my job. And I think that's part of the problem we face when we first start this art is we think we compare it too much to stand-up comedians who are all about the laugh, are all about, everything, every sentence has to hit. When that's not true for a storyteller. The storyteller is setting everything up to hit at the end or for having these big moments that pay off. So that's the payoff, not every sentence should be a payoff. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, no.
Tell me you got something, Dave.
Come on, Dave.
I'm gonna.
I just killed 3 minutes, sir.
Well, I'm gonna be quiet and build tension for a while. Actually, no. You did totally. Actually, like. So, how I want to answer this is, I don't know if I had a moment, but I had a process, and I actually got to tell you a little bit of a story about myself. I'm not sure if Bob, I know you know this. I'm not sure, James, if you knew this. So, I actually got my bachelor's degree in fine arts painting. And
really?
I went to the College for Creative Studies up in Detroit. And I remember actually when I had a breakthrough up there was when I was in my studio my senior year. I had all these books out of like who I was trying to emulate, the work I was trying to like emulate and be like. And I was struggling. And then like I had a moment where I put everything away and I just started working. And then I noticed after a while, after like months, when I finally looked back, I was like, oh no, that's when I started doing it, is when it wasn't like so in my mind and it was so prescient. I literally was just reacting. I was just working with the pieces and I was just reacting with themselves. And I think I went through a very similar thing when after I had finally stopped doing the grad program up in Detroit. So when I moved back to Cincinnati, but I was driving up every weekend to do the SC grad program. I was doing the same thing. Like I was taking the writing classes, I was taking leveled classes, and I remember it was all prescient, and I was trying to get the laugh all the time. Because I think when we are writing, there's things, how do we milk the funny out of it? And how do we typically, a lot of people don't say it, but how do we milk the funny out of, how do I get the funny line? How do I get the laugh? And when I noticed is when I started working on stuff down here, I was able to, I started actually doing more scripted stuff that was outside of comedy, but was more scripted stuff. And the idea of not serving yourself, how do you serve the scene? So even when you're still not doing anything, like you're still doing something that serves the scene. What's the most important thing that needs to happen in this? And how do you help out? And actually like the collaborative element of people backstage are like helping you set props. You're setting things for other people. They're setting you. And if this thing doesn't happen, you can't do your thing. But also if you don't hit the energy at the same level or do the same things consistently, this person's moments is ruined. And so that responsibility of actually taking care of each other in scripted material, yes, we talk about it in improv all the time, but I got to put it into effect there as well. And I was like, oh, this makes sense for also how to present a show and how to be in my scenes. So it doesn't have to be about what does my character, how do I make my character look good? It's what does the scene need? And sometimes I need to be the horrible person, or I just need to shut up and listen to the person right now to make this work.
That's
awesome. Yeah.
There's so much to be learned from scripted stuff. I think that is really like whether it is doing some like script analysis and script reading and seeing the way that like moments and arcs build and character intention is expressed, or like what you're saying, Dave, is being able to see improv tools in a new way when you're working in a show that all the moving pieces are relying on each other, and then reapplying that to improv. I think that's awesome. I mean, even Bob, what you were saying about taking sketch and writing at the same time, like can have these negative side effects. It's like getting to a point where they can have a positive effect on each other.
Yes.
is also super helpful for both. You just got to know which parts you got to keep and which parts are not going to mix well. I agree with you brought up Laughter House 5, Bob, and I think that's true for me too. Is maybe if I had to point to a moment when I started to really value keeping things simpler, playing more patient, grounded characters, it would be in that show, which was for me also the first long form that I did, an hour-long show, and I don't know if maybe this will take us on a different tangent. But
just really quick for Dave, like, can we explain Laughter House 5 like really fast?
Yes, please. I was about to ask.
Yeah, I can see it in your face. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was like, Dave is squinting a little bit. Like, see,
you are saying me. Laughter House, right?
So Dave says so much with his face. I'm paying attention. I'm reacting, and I'm seeing. Yeah.
So Go Comedy does the Ferndale Reads show, where the selected book of the year for this reading program put on by the library gets featured in all these different ways. And one of the ways is that Go Comedy takes the featured book for the year and then will adapt an improvised show that uses the themes and various elements of the book in a show. Gary Lehman adapted an improv form out of Slaughterhouse 5, and Bob and I and a few others were in that show, and it was our first. The Ferndale Read show is always a hour-long, long-form show format. So that's what the show was, and you want to know the format?
No, I was curious. Like, sounds like you're also not like just retelling it. You're just taking elements and themes of it to inspire yourselves. Cool. Yeah, and then what was this? What like? I mean, I don't think I've done Slaughterhouse 5 since high school, so like my memory of it is vague. But like I'm trying to also like the things I do remember is like, how do you put that into a show? Yeah, what do you do? What was the themes? How did you format that?
Well, yeah, so
great question.
So let's see if I can keep this succinct, because
keep it simple.
Explaining Slaughterhouse 5 is probably going to be busy enough. But the protagonist in Slaughterhouse 5 is unstuck in time. So Billy Pilgrim is visiting these different points on the timeline of his life in a non-linear way, and he's jumping forward to when he's old, and he's jumping back to moments in the war, and there's also a part of his life where he's abducted by aliens, and he's in this alien like human cage kind of thing, so he's bouncing around his own life in a chopped up way. So
because if time travel wasn't weird enough for Vonnegut, let's throw aliens in as well. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
The idea of experiencing your life in a nonlinear fashion could be and having war in there, like the Dresden bombing in there. And he's like, no. There's also 6 years where he's abducted by aliens. But so for the show, we had one person play the protagonist who was gonna. Excuse the sirens in the background here.
It puts us in a place. Gives us a place.
Yeah.
All right.
Soundscaping.
Easy energy.
Yep.
But the protagonist, the form was would use a certain order of scenes where it would be like there's the present day timeline, the main timeline, and then there's like scenes from the character's youth, scenes from the character being in war, and of course we involved aliens. But you know the relationship between all those things and the different characters in that collection of scenes were different, and we would bounce. The protagonist was in every scene, but we would bounce around those chapters in a non-linear way, the same way that the book does.
So it sounds like because it's non-linear, like the need to really listen to each other to be like, where are we with this person right now? Especially as an ensemble, and for that person to know where they are. Like that's like the most important thing almost is where are we right now?
Yeah. Yes.
I think that's true, but I think really for me the thing that was it's because it's longer and because you have this opportunity to be a protagonist in every scene where you don't get that same kind of antsiness to get to the thing that you do in shorter sets or in short form, and so yes, on top of a complicated story structure, getting long enough time to sink in and explore it was something that opened things up for me, just to get a chance to play in a different pacing, like we said. And I think that this is where the tangent might come up that I mentioned earlier, but just the idea that like in my experience with New York, and I know in Chicago and in LA, they are shrinking down time slots a lot in the normal times of when we're able to go out and do shows. Long form slots in New York tend to be like almost always less than 20 minutes. And sometimes in a lineup of troops in an indie show, the time slots are like 10 to 12 minutes. And even if your group is like 6 or 8 people.
Excuse me.
And that's tough. I wish more people got an opportunity to do real long form here and there, as opposed to things swinging the opposite way and trying to crunch everything down, because I think that's going to have the negative side effect of not keeping things simple.
I'm still reacting to like, well, I don't want everyone to get an hour, but right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know how it was for you guys, but you know, when I first started, my first troupe was my class, and I had a big class. So we would get those 20, 22-minute slots, but we had 15 people performing. So it did kind of create a bad habit of, I got to get out there and say something, or I'm, you know, what's the point? You know, or people aren't going to think I'm funny, or whatever judge was in my head at that point. You know, so I think that's part of the problem with like stage time. Could be an issue.
Yeah. So we do that as well. As like usually we give like people like 20 minutes to 30 minutes. I think we've done that weird training bit of like most of the time they get around 2022. So you do see a lot of sets run out of steam at that time, is because that's what they're conditioned to do. Though there's also been other times like they were done after 12. I wish I could have just hit the lights on them then. Probably would have been better for everybody involved.
True, yeah.
But like, but what Bob just said though, the idea though of like, yeah, your first troupe is usually your first class or like people that you know, and they're usually huge. And besides just the politics that are going on in those, and the availability of people's different sets of how much they're committed to it, and then you've got all those things going on. And one thing I've noticed is, the longer your career goes, usually like all of a sudden then you're in like trios and duos, and like it's very odd that you see like people have been doing it for a very long time. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, of like people that have like 5 or 6 person sets, unless it's like a show that's been going on forever that they've been doing for a long time. Whereas usually it's like, no, this person and this person, we have a rhythm, we have a pattern, we play with each other, and we know how to play with each other. And I'm tired of trying to get people out of rehearsal and different sets of commitment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Maybe what do you guys think about the idea of like, because not only is it probably not a good idea to give everyone 30 minutes to an hour when you're like, as developing students, and also you just don't have the time real estate to realistically do that. But I'm wondering like, okay, what would be like a beneficial solution? And maybe what I'm thinking is like, I've seen jams where long form stage manager pulls lights or host can call scene or whatever, but like it's just 2-person scenes, and it's like 3-minute scenes, and it's like I would imagine that for a lot of students that's also a rare opportunity, is to be like, I'm going to do a 3-minute 2-person scene, guaranteed not to be interrupted. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I think that'd be. There was a show, I was in Pittsburgh, and they did something similar to that, but it was a 7, like you just get 7-minute chunks. It was called 7 Minutes in Heaven. And you get to go up there, and either you can bring something like a sketch, or you and somebody who's never played before can play together, or you can just put your name in the hat and they'll pick two people to do a scene together. And 7 minutes is a long time if you're not comfortable with pacing. So I think something like that can be very useful, because like Dave said, sometimes you want to invest in these newer troops, but they also have to do the work.
Yeah.
So me personally, like, if I'm going to give you that amount of time, you should have earned it some way. Not just getting together, but getting together with a coach and actually exploring what this feels like. If you have more than 20 minutes, it shouldn't ever be a rehearsal on stage. But sometimes it happens, but treat the stage time with respect and an opportunity rather than an opportunity to rehearse. So yeah, by having a coach and having someone like, we've all coached. So if I was running a theater and I was giving a student a long form, or even like an hour show, like on a Thursday or something, when it's maybe not as busy, I would put the coach accountable. Like, is this a troupe that can handle 45 minutes? If so, cool. If they don't, you got to coach them better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends on the opportunity, because it's like, I remember like half-hour sets and 45-minute sets used to really feel like the norm growing up, and it feels like it has shrunk. It feels like 20-minute sets, just like opportunities-wise, and like how theaters, even our theater, does things. I think it goes back, but we're also kind of like also talking about like, short-form jams are easy. You got your list of people that you want up there. You've got the games that you're going to play. You call up the next people. You explain the game, and you go. With long form sets, is it like, so we experimented with some that we would do. We'd split everyone up, and we were getting like a ton of people coming to these, so that each team would have like 10 to 15 people. We had like 3 teams, and we'd give them like 15 minutes each. But then it became kind of a cluster cussy, just because it was like, everyone's trying to get in there, because it's like, there's 15 other people up here with me, how to do this. And how do I make, and then other people will bulldoze everyone else. There's other people that don't get off the back of line the whole time. And I so there's also that, like, it wasn't the most successful thing, or it had detriments to it as well. Though I do love the idea of like, you're going to play a 3-minute scene right now. Here you go. Here's a suggestion. Hit it. Yeah. We'll call scene on you. No one's going to come in, tag you out, or anything like that, to see what those muscles are like. I know I'm saying the interesting things about these things. I'm not giving any answers whatsoever.
Hey, we're in a good spot of the conversation. That's just the interest without answer. Now it's up to you, fair audience.
Well, if this is both an opportunity and an exercise, what do you guys think about having like a shot clock type deal? Like, this is 3 minutes. You can see the 3 minutes. So it almost teaches them the pace, because if you don't understand your own, internal clock, if you're not comfortable with pacing or pausing and all that stuff, seeing a visual representation of, this is what a minute feels like, this is what 2 minutes feel like, this is, we're gonna get there, so time to tie everything up in a nice bow. Whether you do, because I've seen those scenes where there has been a shot clock present, and people tie it up too quick because they don't realize how long 30 seconds can be.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and they all lived happily ever after.
Well, I think
29, 28, 27, 26.
I think that's probably something. Maybe it's like, okay, we're talking about jams, but also in rehearsals, having opportunities. People always want to like run sets, or again, I think that's something that a little bit different for me in New York than it was in Detroit, where sometimes a coach is a babysitter, and they're like, we just want to run sets and let us know how it went. And it's like, but I suppose it's a little side jab at my experience for no reason.
No.
Hey, New York.
No,
yeah,
boom, take that.
No. You could probably do in rehearsals is like, if you're going to run a set, maybe run one that's a little bit longer, and just kind of like get a feel for a different pacing and a different opportunity to play a longer set, because you will grow from it when you're under a different set of pressures or parameters. I think that on the having a clock on a jam, one thing that's interesting to me is that, like, how do you have that and then learn to not worry about it? Because the countdown, like you said, can kind of have the same problem that we're trying to solve from the beginning of sets, where it's like you're trying to move too quickly because you think it's over and you're forgetting the countdown. So like, or forgetting what those seconds actually feel like. So how I think that doing that in a live setting might kind of, if the goal is know the clock is there, watch the clock, but also try to forget about the clock. Just have it remind you lightly of where you're at, so you can check in and compare real time to your mental space. I like that. I would imagine there's growing pains for a lot of people of not letting it send you into panic.
Is there something? I don't know. This is, what y'all just said just stemmed a cool idea. At least I hope it's cool. Is the idea of like, what if it was a long form jam or an open scene jam? You've got a max of 3 minutes, but the host, they might call it before, because it's not a teaching thing. Like, we don't have to teach everyone how to play a 3 minute scene. Yeah. It's like, we're going to let you two play. And if you nail it at a minute and a half, I'll call scene on you. And you had another minute and a half left, but you know what? Don't worry about it. We'll get the next two people up. But like, no, you have a max of 3. We're not going to leave you out there for longer than that. And then,
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, because I'm sorry, I was just thinking, it's like, you're going to give people a victory. That's it. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
No, you're good. Because it also gives people the opportunity. Well, if you want to do a 3 minute scene, well, then you got to pace yourself better. So it is, I enjoy that. Like, you like the making sure the clock's not the only thing that ends the scene. That's pretty cool.
I mean, this is just my absurd brain thinking, but I also like the idea of it being like a minute 45 and being like scene, but then still waiting down the clock until you start the next one.
You didn't pace yourself right. I'm gonna rub your nose in it. James Casada out.
I'm just gonna feel what that potential feels like.
Yeah.
Talk amongst yourself. You would have filled it up if you made better decisions.
That's great for a minute 45 scene, but
yeah.
I mean, well, no, you could have explored that backstory a little bit. You had an extra minute. I think there was a game there that we played, but that's just me.
Yeah.
I would also like you to keep score. Well, last week, Bob and Dave only did a minute and 40 scene. Let's see if they can reach their full potential and do 3 minutes.
Yeah.
What do you say, guys? Can you?
Oh, my. And then there's a competition of like you're keeping track of how much people time have taken on stage, and like the goal is to like have as much time as possible because you get 3 minutes. And then like there's someone that like you call 3 minutes, but they're playing the game of like, no, they're not leaving because they're trying to keep more time on their board.
Abusing the system.
Oh God.
Rollover minutes. You have rollover minutes. It's like, okay, you're gonna get 10 shows, and if you don't use part of your 3 minutes, it's gonna accumulate. So if you want your last show to be 25 minutes, you're going to have to shave that off of your 3 minute slot.
Wow.
Guys, I know you were building a beautiful scene, but I want us to save 2 minutes for next week. So I called it. I'm sorry. I called it.
Yeah. Hey, Mom, what are you cooking for dinner? And scene. All right. Yeah. 5 minutes next week.
Woo. Yeah.
That was going nowhere. I want this for next week.
Yeah. I'm sick of playing the mom.
Okay, so let's wrap it up with these thoughts. What would you guys, if you were going to teach a workshop on simplicity, regardless of what the exercises are that went into it, by the end of it, what would you hope that the biggest takeaway would be for people who took that workshop?
I think for me is, did either of you see the movie Grandmaster? It was about Ip that taught Bruce Lee, but it was like his life before like World War One. Oh. Yeah. It's about, and a lot of it is philosophies of like all these different types of martial arts philosophies. And the very Reader's Digest version is he's a Southern master. The Northern masters are kind of douchey to everyone, but they are like the better fighters. And he goes and talks, but he's by far the best fighter in the country. He talks to all of these Southern masters, and they all have different perspectives on stuff. And like I started taking that to improv and everything like that. But he talks about in fighting, we have all these different philosophies, all these different schools, but it always comes down to the vertical and the horizontal. And they refer to it as like the vertical and horizontal strikes, but also like one person's standing and one person's on the ground at the end of it. Like it's that simple. And I think for me, if I was teaching a class about simplicity, I think if all they came away with it is listening and reacting just to the information that's in there, that information that's there, not bringing outside stuff. What's that thing that's being built in that moment? So listening and reacting in the moment. If they started using that as a habit, that's what I want them to take from it.
I love that. I absolutely love it. For me, I think it would be that whole idea of everything that you need in an improv scene happens in the first couple of seconds, the first beat, if you will, and really exploring that beat. And then using that through discovery, creating an arc, rather than keep on offering up different things until something sticks. Because I think that's a bad habit people do. Like, I'm not comfortable with this. How about this? I'm forcing today to be different than allowing today to be different. The other thing I hope they would take away is just because you have an idea doesn't necessarily mean it's the time to use it. Mm-hmm. So having the freedom of putting stuff on your improv shelf until like you can really max that out, or either use it as a heightening device or a momentum device.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like that. I think.
What about you, James?
I think I would say I'm actually going to, just to prove the benefit of these conversations, I'm pulling something that I came across earlier in this conversation, which is going to be, it's not about fast or slow, it's about smooth. So slow down now so that whatever habits you have aren't getting in your way, and whether you are going to move nice and slow and patient or very, fast and impulsive, the things that you do will smooth out no matter what pace you're moving at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, before we let you go here, Dave, is there anything that you want to plug that you've been working on that we can find online or anywhere else?
Yes. So you can always find more information at otrimprov.com, as well as we're producers of Comedy Sportz Cincinnati. You can, Comedy Sportz Cincinnati right now has a regular Monday night show on YouTube at 7:30. That's a family-friendly short form improv show. Then on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock, we have an improv jam that anyone can join and actually play for an hour if you're looking for something to break up your day. And then on Thursday nights, we have one of our instructors. She's doing an improv crash course that it's in week 3 right now. It'll go on for another 4 weeks. So I think by the time you hear this, probably have another 2 weeks. But anyone can jump in on that. And I know it's more long form based for that type of audience. I think by the time they'll be working on Laurents and Harold's, so I've seen stuff. And then on Saturday nights, we also have, we're producing a crime procedural called Twin Valleys. It's Facebook Live. Technically, it's pretty cool. That's really fun. And then I'm working on a podcast right now. I'm an actor in a podcast. It's called Have Monster Will Travel. And that is it's a podcast done by Queen City Flash locally here in Cincinnati to a bunch of friends. And the idea behind it is a best friend, her and her monster. They're trying to find out this monster's origins. And there's probably about like 5 or 6 episodes right now on Spotify, on iTunes. And I think that's also one that any member of the family can watch or listen to as well.
Cool. That's awesome. That's a lot, man. Good for you.
Wow. You're keeping busy, bud. That's good to hear.
Trying to.
Cool. Well, again, it was really great to just chat with you, and we appreciate you taking the time, and we'll catch you next time on Improv FAQ at length.
Love you, buddy. Good seeing you.
Love you guys.
Love you.